They burned her cabin because she loved a man they called the enemy. But she never stopped waiting for the one who promised to finish what they started. This is not just a love story. It's a tale of fire and forgiveness, of a woman who refused to bow to hatred, and a Cheyenne warrior who rode back into the ashes, alone but not empty-handed. Set in the haunting beauty of the American West, this story will carry you through heartbreak, hope, and the healing power of a love that outlives fear. Come closer and let it whisper to your soul.
The cabin at the edge of the forest had long turned to ashes, leaving behind a scent of charred wood and a lingering wound in the cold heart of winter. The wind howled through blackened tree stumps, whispering like late-night regrets. On the pale canvas of snow, a lone woman knelt, sifting through what remained, with bare, trembling hands, trying to gather the pieces of something no one else believed could be saved. Her name was Clara May Whitlow, 27 years old, a widow since the border skirmishes took her husband, killed not in battle, but in mercy, when he tried to shield a Cheyenne child from gunfire. They called it an accident of war, but Clara knew the truth, and so did the town, even if they never said it aloud. Since then, Clara lived alone on the outskirts, where no one came unless they needed something. Her herbal remedies, her help with births, her silence. She never complained. She lived like a ghost might live, sowing herbs in summer, chopping wood in fall, mending clothes in winter. Nights were spent by the hearth, firelight dancing on wooden walls, her eyes always quiet, always elsewhere. The townsfolk called her Witchlow, a cruel twist of her last name and the rumors that clung to her like smoke. She's been touched by Indian magic, they whispered. No proof, just fear. And in the Wild West, fear could burn faster than fire. The truth? Clara had once saved a Cheyenne warrior. He'd been left to die near the river, his back soaked in blood, his breath shallow. Clara had dragged him into a root cellar, hid him, healed him. For 3 nights, she fed him broth and poultices, barely sleeping. On the 4th, his eyes opened. In the flickering light of a snowstorm night, he whispered something in his native tongue. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the look. His name was Weyanoka, which meant first light of morning. He never left, not because of the wound, but because something unseen had taken root between them, like a quiet string binding soul to soul. He built a small shelter on the edge of the woods. He hunted deer, chopped firewood, left fish at a doorstep. They didn't live together, but they were no longer apart. Then winter came early. One morning, townspeople saw Weyanoka helping the Whitmore children tend to an injured horse, and someone asked, "Why would he help?" Another said, "She's bewitched him." That night, they came.
No knock, no warning, just fire. Clara rushed out, screaming. No one listened. The flames devoured her cabin. She fell in the snow, clutching a blood-stained handkerchief, Weyanoka's, the last thing he left before heading out to hunt days ago. They said, "This is what you get for loving the enemy." But they never understood. Clara never feared enemies. What she feared most were neighbors who'd rather destroy than try to understand. She stayed there until morning, snow on her hair, wind cutting her skin, but she didn't cry. In her heart, one promise remained. If he ever returns, I'll still be here. The fire had long since died out, but its memory clung to the ruins like smoke on old cloth. Days passed, then a week. The townspeople avoided the edge of the forest as if her land had become cursed ground. Children were warned not to go near. Clara didn't rebuild. She simply stayed,
her presence like a stubborn candle refusing to go out. Each morning she gathered sticks, built a tiny fire under the open sky, and brewed bitter tea with frost-covered herbs. Her hands were rough, bandaged from splinters and burns, but steady. She spoke to no one, but she listened, to the wind, to the hush of the woods, to the silence where his footsteps used to be. Then, one late afternoon, the sun low and blood orange against the snow, a shadow appeared at the edge of the trees. Not him. It was a stranger, an older woman, wrapped in dark wool, with a voice like gravel and smoke. "You still waiting for him?" she asked. Clara didn't answer. The woman crouched beside the fire. "They say you lost your mind, talking to trees, dreaming of red men." Clara looked her straight in the eye. "I lost everything, except the truth." The woman nodded, as if she understood more than she let on. Then she reached into her pocket and handed Clara something, a carved wooden pendant, worn smooth with age. "He gave this to my brother," the woman said. "Your man saved him once, said if he ever needed help to show this, so I'm showing it to you now." Clara turned the pendant in her hand. It was shaped like a sun, with tiny grooves that caught the light. She remembered the night Weyanoka had carved it by the fire, humming a tune in a language she couldn't speak. The woman stood. "He's alive, but not safe." Clara's throat tightened. "Where?" she whispered. But the woman was already walking away, her voice floating behind her like wind through pine needles. "You'll find him where the earth bleeds red, where no white soul dares to go." That night, Clara didn't sleep. She wrapped the pendant in a strip of cloth, tied it around her wrist, and packed what little she had: dried berries, a flask of water, her father's old rifle, and the thick wool blanket Weyanoka had once given her. Before dawn she set off. No map, no plan. Just the memory of a man who had once knelt to clean her wounds without saying a word, and a love worth walking into exile for.
The land changed as Clara journeyed north. The snow deepened, the trees thickened, and the world seemed to grow quieter with every mile, until even the wind began to whisper less and less, like it was holding its breath. She followed no road, only faint signs, broken twigs, a bloodied feather in the snow, a single hoofprint pressed deep beside a stream. These were the trails of someone trying not to be found, and yet her heart kept pulling her forward. One night, under the shelter of a narrow canyon wall, she lit a fire from damp twigs and huddled into Weyanoka's blanket. Its wool still carried a faint trace of smoke and pine and something deeper, something that felt like home. She dreamt of him. In the dream, he stood by a river of red earth, staring up at a hawk circling above. His face was older, marked by shadows and ash, but when he turned to her, his eyes were the same, quiet, endless, and full of questions she never had the answers to. She woke with tears frozen on her cheeks. By the fifth day, her boots were soaked through, her lips cracked, her hands shook, but she found it. A camp hidden in the cliffs, smoke curling into the cold sky like a silent prayer. She approached slowly, one step at a time, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the crunch of snow beneath her feet. Then she saw him, Weyanoka, thinner than before, his long hair tied back, eyes darker now. He was helping an elder man up a ridge, guiding him with a gentle hand. He looked tired, but alive. Clara didn't speak. She couldn't. Her voice got lost somewhere between her lungs and the 1,000 miles she had walked to get here. But Weyanoka saw her. He froze. Their eyes met across a white field. And in that silence, everything returned. Firelight, wounds,
promises. He walked to her slowly, as if not trusting what he saw.
When he finally stood in front of her, he didn't say her name. He just reached out and touched her wrist where the carved pendant still hung. The exact moment his fingers brushed hers, her knees gave out. He caught her. In the days that followed, Clara recovered in a small tent warmed by coals and cedar smoke. Weyanoka never left her side, but he rarely spoke. When he did, it was soft, careful, as if each word might undo everything. He told her why he never came back. The day the townspeople burned her cabin, he had been taken, ambushed by a scout party who mistook him for a raider. He'd fought, then surrendered when he realized they wore U.S. Army blue. They dragged him to a reservation far east, left him there, nameless and bound. Months passed. He escaped, found his way back to the old lands, but when he returned, her cabin was gone, ashes, and they told him she had vanished. "I thought you were dead," he said quietly one night. "So did I," she replied. And for a time, the world stilled. They lived among the cliff people, Cheyenne who had refused to bow, who moved like shadows through the canyons, free but hunted. Clara helped heal children. She taught an old woman how to make poultices from pine sap. She laughed once when Weyanoka stole a handful of berries from her basket. It was the first time her voice had sounded like music in months. But peace doesn't last long in places where hatred grows roots. One morning, a scout ran into camp, breathless. "They found us, militia, 2 days behind." The elders argued. Some said run, others said fight. Weyanoka said only one word: leave. He looked at Clara. "You have to go back." She shook her head. "I won't leave you." His eyes said more than his lips ever could. "You must." She knew then he wasn't sending her away to protect her from death. He was sending her away to protect her from what he might have to become. That night, he gave her his horse, packed her satchel with smoked meat and a water pouch. He touched her cheek once, like memorizing the shape of goodbye. She said nothing. She rode through the night, didn't stop, didn't cry. But as dawn broke and the canyon disappeared behind her, she clutched the pendant around her wrist and whispered, like a prayer choked by frost, "I will come back, and if I can't, then I will wait, just like before." The winter passed like a long sigh, slow, cold, and filled with the kind of silence that made people forget how to hope. Clara would turn to the edge of town, to a world that hadn't noticed her absence, hadn't changed since the day they'd called her a disgrace. She rented a room above the carpenter shop, helped mend shirts for a seamstress, and kept her head down. But each morning she rose before the sun, walked to the ridge beyond the old well, and stared toward the canyon, waiting for a sign. Weeks passed, then months. No riders came, no word. Some nights she dreamed of fire again, only this time it wasn't her cabin, it was the canyon, the cliff walls crumbling, smoke choking out the stars. She'd wake up with her fingers clenched around the pendant and no air in her lungs. The town moved on. Children grew. A new pastor came. Men drank and fought over card games like nothing had ever burned. But Clara, she became something else. The silence changed her. She learned to listen to the wind, to read clouds like messages, to patch boots and stitch gunshot wounds. People still whispered when she passed, but they stopped pointing. She wasn't a witch anymore. She was just a woman who worked hard and kept her eyes on the horizon. And then, one afternoon, everything changed. The air shifted. The horses in the stable grew restless, dogs barked, and then a sound. Faint at first, then louder. Hoofbeats. Not one horse, not two, a whole thunder of them. People rushed into the street, shading their eyes from the sun. The sheriff placed a hand on his holster, squinting toward the hills. And then they appeared. A line of riders, 20, maybe more, moving like smoke down the slope. At the front was a tall man on a black horse, his figure silhouetted against the burning sky. Clara stepped out of the tailor's shop, needle still in hand. She knew that horse. She knew that man. Weyanoka. But something was different. He wore no war paint, no feathers, just a plain coat and a pendant carved from bone and silver hanging openly against his chest. Behind him, the riders weren't warriors.
They were women, children, elders, the survivors, the forgotten, the ones who'd run. They came in peace, but they came with purpose. As they reached the edge of town, the sheriff stepped forward. His hand hovered near his weapon. Townsfolk began murmuring. Doors slammed. The store owner pulled down his shutters. But Weyanoka didn't slow. He dismounted in the center of the square, snow crunching beneath his boots. He walked forward alone, calm, every step echoing like a drumbeat of old truths. Clara couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He stopped 5 feet in front of her, and from behind his coat, he pulled a small leather pouch. He knelt. Silence fell like a snowfall. When he opened the pouch, he revealed something no one expected. A wedding ring. Simple, hand-carved, silver twisted with river stone. Clara's breath hitched. The sheriff stepped forward. "Now listen here, boy." But Weyanoka raised a hand, slow, steady, and spoke in perfect English. "I did not come to fight. I came to finish what they burned." He turned to Clara. "You still have the pendant?" She nodded, hand trembling. "It's yours now, and this is mine." He placed the ring on the ground between them. "I don't ask for forgiveness from the town, only from you." Behind him, a child stepped forward, no older than 6, holding a small clay bowl filled with fresh snow. She offered it like an offering, like a blessing. The sheriff looked around. No one moved, not a sound. Even the wind had stopped. And Clara? She fell to her knees, picked up the ring with both hands, and said, through tears that felt like warmth after years of cold, "Yes." There was no applause, no smiles, just silence. But it was the kind of silence that came after something sacred had been spoken. Weyanoka stood. Clara took his hand, and together they turned from the crowd, from the judgment, from the ashes of what once was, toward something new. Not a home built by others, but one they would build together. From stone, from earth, from memory, from love.
They left before sunrise. No goodbyes, no promises. Just the quiet crunch of hoofbeats and the soft breath of dawn spreading over the hills like a hush of mercy. Clara rode behind Weyanoka on his horse, arms around his waist, cheek against his back. The town faded behind them, a place that had never truly been home. Ahead lay open land, the kind without fences or grudges, the kind that remembered nothing and welcomed everything. They didn't speak much during those first days. There was no need. Words had already been said, or burned, or buried. What remained was the quiet kind of love, the kind that didn't demand or explain, just stayed. By the time they reached the canyon, Weyanoka's canyon. It was mid-autumn. Leaves the color of old fire danced along the ground. The air tasted like wood smoke and rain. The place was nearly empty now. The others had gone deeper into the valley, starting new lives farther from the border, farther from fear. But a small cabin stood near the river. New logs, a roof patched with willow bark, the scent of sage hanging from the doorway like a silent welcome. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. Weyanoka lit a fire. Clara unpacked her sewing kit. He showed her how to dry roots for tea. She taught him to mend socks. At night, they lay close, not always talking, but always listening, to owls, to wind, to the beat of each other's hearts. Some days grief returned. It always does. Clara would wake from dreams where the cabin still burned, where her hands reached for help that never came. Weyanoka would sit beside her, silent, holding her wrist the way one steadies a shaking branch. Other times it was him, his people, his memories, the faces of elders lost, the songs no longer sung. But they gave those ghosts a home too, not to haunt, but to rest. Winter came early that year. They gathered wood, dried deer meat, lined the inside walls with bear hide. Weyanoka carved 2 small figures from ashwood, a man and a woman holding hands. He placed them on the mantel. Clara stitched curtains, painted flowers around the windows. One afternoon, she stepped outside and saw him planting a small sapling near the cabin. It wasn't native to the canyon. She asked him why. He smiled. "It's from your old garden," he said. "I went back." She stared at the tiny tree, rooted now in a place where no fire could reach it.
And for the first time in years, she wept. Not from pain, from peace. By spring, children visited their home. Tribal boys bringing fish, girls asking for ribbons to braid. One child, a girl with eyes like dusk, followed Clara around like a shadow. When her mother fell sick, Clara stayed up 3 nights nursing her back to health. Afterward, the girl never left Clara's side. Weyanoka built a swing. Clara taught the girl to read. They didn't speak of adoption. It wasn't necessary. Family, they'd learned, was not always about blood. It was about who stays when everything else leaves. Years passed. The cabin grew. Another room. A fenced garden. A carving of a hawk above the doorway. When Weyanoka's hair turned silver, Clara's fingers still found it beautiful. When her hands grew stiff with age, he kissed the joints one by one before bed. They didn't talk of the past much anymore. Not the fire, not the town. But one evening, as the sky turned the color of bruised violets, Clara pulled out the pendant, the one he'd carved all those years ago. "I kept it," she said softly. "I know. It kept you." She nodded. "But you finished it." He didn't answer, just reached into his coat and pulled something from his pocket. A piece of paper, a drawing, a little cabin, smoke rising from its chimney, 2 figures standing hand in hand beneath a tree. He handed it to her.
Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. On the back, he'd written a single line. "They burned it down, we built it again." She folded it carefully, pressed it to her heart, and whispered, "Yes, we did." When Weyanoka passed, it was during a thunderstorm, the kind that came fast and left the land cleaner than before. He was buried beneath the tree he planted, the one from her old garden. Clara sat beside the grave every morning, her hair now a crown of snow, her hands never empty, sometimes with thread, sometimes with stories. One day, the little girl, now nearly grown, sat beside her and asked, "Will you leave too?" Clara smiled. "Not yet," she said. "I still have things to finish." The girl looked confused. "But everything's already built." Clara looked toward the cabin, the garden, the grave, and the sky beyond. "Not everything," she said. "Some things we build again and again, just to remember how." And with that, she stood, her bones aching but her spirit light. She went inside. The fire was still burning. She added one more log and let it go into the night. This story isn't only about love. It's about courage, redemption, and the quiet belief that something beautiful can still rise from what's been burned down. If this story touched your heart, let us know by clicking like, hitting subscribe, and turning on the notification bell so you never miss another soulful Western tale. Every bit of support from you is like a silent embrace to someone who still believes in love after loss. Thank you for being here, and we can't wait to share the next journey with you.